Ladies and gentlemen, we are here with my good friend, Tamika Neal. She is the manager of the outreach. What's the real title? Of outreach and education at Planned Parenthood for Central and Western New York. I'm so proud of her. It's been a long journey. For those of you that don't know, Tamika started out as a 14-year-old teenager working for Planned Parenthood as a peer educator, learning how to help her peers. And now, as an adult, she's a manager of other adults where she's still helping her peers to help the community in reducing teen pregnancy and STI rates in the community. And I just want to say salute and welcome. And how you doing today? What's going on with you?
Hello, good morning. Thank you for having me. It was a struggle. They'll probably see that in the behind the scenes content. Um,
This
uh,
session started at 10, so I've been up here just making.
sorry,
I had some time.
sorry, they was giving out free eggs.
Hey, I'm
Mm.
not mad at you. Oh my God, they was giving out free eggs. Okay, let's start there.
Yeah. Buffalo Public School Systems with their Saturday academies. Some of
Please
them
let
have
my people know.
uh,
We don't know.
I
We weren't
have
there.
markets. I don't know which ones in which states specifically. You can look it up on the Buffalo or on the BPS website. But yeah, there was one near where I was staying last night, and so it's near my partner's house, and so we ran up there, got some eggs, got some potatoes and cabbage and onions. They gave us a pound of ground beef, some apple cider, which I love. Me some apple cider, my
I'm going to get some after this.
favorite, right? Um, what else? Yogurt, a little chicken, like a whole frozen, a little bigger than a hen, well, but not like a chicken,
Like a fryer joint.
A little smaller than that. Like they're a little smaller than the ones you would get at like Top, like the pre-cooked ones you'd get at like Tops or what. They're a little smaller than that, but it's a free chicken. I can make the meat
Amazing.
to make stock and all types of stuff. So I will get my money's worth. Thank you very much for that,
Yeah.
Buffalo system. Um, and then technology is my kryptonite. So I be telling the listen, if I could have pagers in a cell phone, that's what, or in a pay phone, that is what I would go back to. I would keep quarters. I mean, I already keep quarters just floating in the bottom of my bag, anyways. But like, I would
Now you know you wouldn't go back to just us pay. Do you remember how the pay phones were when people were using them?
vaguely because I was on the tail end of that in my childhood.
Right. The
Right.
You ever been inside of a bus stop recently?
I was at an Amtrak station last week.
Nah, I mean a metro bus stop.
Oh, I have not taken the Metro bus since my parents forced
If
me to
you walk inside of one of those plastic bus stop containers,
get.
that's like how a phone booth used to be.
Like
It used to smell like pee. It used to be all types of mucus all over the phone.
I never experienced having them in a container of any sorts. It was
Like
just like
Superman jumped in the booth and jumped out. Yeah,
go get these elements while you on this phone call. Like you was just no privacy, no nothing. So it was just here's a phone by the wall and the ATM.
remember it used to be like a line of phones. Like
Mm-hmm.
like you'll be standing next to somebody just trying to be like, Mama said what now?
And
The other
except
person be standing next to you like, yeah, when I get home, I'm gonna lick up. And then they look over and you crying your eyeballs out.
no, I'd have been like, hang on a second, go on.
that's how people learn back in the day. You overhear people phone calls. It's like
Right?
it's like GTA when you used to walk down the street and just hear random comments. You'd be like, "Oh, I didn't know people did that." Okay,
What's GTA?
Grand Theft Auto. But
Oh,
listen,
oh.
let's move on. What's going on, brother? Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I'm on a phone call. I'm gonna get with you in a second. All right, all right.
Hootie hoo. Okay, let me stop playing. Um,
The struggle is real.
it is. It's my ADHD is real today too. Um, all
I've
right,
been
so
saying it for 2 hours.
we are starting the conversation of
Yes. So
our youth, pleasure, all that fun stuff.
Well, I think one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you specifically is because you work with youth. Um, I want to say mostly, in my understanding,
Yeah,
you do work with adults in the community and adults with disabilities, and you work with a wide variety of people. But I know that the focus has been a lot on the teens.
yeah,
So when it comes to pleasure, which is what our show is about, I want to make sure that we're being respectful to the age group in this conversation, and that I'm being uh, only way I know how to say it is checked, if you will. If I'm saying something that the teens are going to be like, cut that off or cancel him or is cringe or whatnot, you know what I'm saying? Because my approach has always been like, I'm big brother, uncle, homie, and it's like that time has passed for a lot of ways.
cringe anymore. I think they took that away from us. Like they're trying to take my skinny leg jeans from me
My
and my
son,
waist and my ankle socks. They're just taking all the things I love.
no, my uncle, my son said cringe. He said that he saw some things that were uh sexually suggestive and he called it cringe.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad it's back. Yay.
He's 6, so I don't know if he just called
More
it.
youth than me, so it's fine.
But basically, I wanted to get into the idea of like, why do you think pleasure is often like left out of mainstream sex education? You know what I'm saying? And like, how could we change that from your perspective?
I think it comes from right. This is a multifaceted thing. Right? There's layers. It's onions. There's a shame aspect of it, right? Which is like I think starts more with maybe parents or guardians and adults because right. Oh, you enjoyed that, right? Even as adults, there's a lot of shame around pleasure. That's why like kink shaming and things like that, right? It exists. So it starts at a much earlier time than we think. Um,
That's
Even like babies, right? Like they're in diapers and you'll see babies that like are touching themselves and you're like, stop, don't do that, right? No, the baby is not masturbating. It does not have a concept of that. It just knows that it feels good. And we as human beings, as animals, are pleasure driven. Sex or not, right? Like we want things that feel good. That's why everybody in Buffalo is hooting and hollering to have this nicer weather come up here soon because we are all sick of this 30-degree weather. Like last week with them 250-degree days, I had all the windows open, just trying to get all the vitamin D, soaking it in, sitting in sunspots like I'm a cat, right? Because it feels good. I will have a glass of wine at the end of the day because it feels good. I will have sex because it feels good, right? So I think there's the shame part and then there's the fear part, right? If we tell kids that sex feels good, that means they're allowed to have sex, right? That's typically the logic that, in my experience, guardians think, right? Where that's not necessarily the case. Like,
right.
should sex feel good? Absolutely.
Right. Like I have I grew, we were in the same group. I worked at Planned Parenthood. I grew up learning these things. So for the audience, it might be, for the people out there, I'm looking at her in my screen. I should be looking right into the camera. But I have a, I understand what she's saying. So I don't have a reaction how you may have a reaction. Feel free to put your reaction into the comments. I'm so sorry to interrupt.
No, it's totally fine. And I would also like to acknowledge that I come from a place like I am not a parent, right? I'm not raising babies outside of what I do with the scope of my work. So while I speak of like, oh, that's scary for parents, right? I don't know that feeling. I just have heard it expressed from my parental friends and from my experience in working with parents and guardians as well. Um, and there seems to be this thought process that if kids are taught about sex, they're going to want to have it, which in my experience is the exact opposite, right? Like when I teach about sex, I do talk about pleasure because it should feel good, but I also talk about how we are animals who are hardwired to procreate.
Okay.
That is why our bodies tell us to have sex. That is why our brains, which are our biggest sex organs, are like, go get it in. That is why at puberty, young penis owning people start making sperm. That is why ovulation happens with vagina owning folks at puberty, because our bodies are like, it's that time, right?
Hmm.
Um, Now, because at our animalistic base we are wired to procreate, that doesn't mean it shouldn't still feel good, right? Like, and
Um,
it's
that's a
in
tough one because listen, we know there's the way we would like things to go based on how we were taught or how the science suggests over time. Like we have facts, and I know
yeah,
you have even more of a up to date understanding of these things. But we know some people really do approach sex as if it's not supposed to be pleasurable or they hinder
not supposed
pleasure.
to until you're married, right? When like puberty is a hard time. Young people, right? And I think that puberty is also happening at early and earlier ages for our youth. And like you're feeling all of these feelings driven by all of these hormones, and you don't really know why, and you don't understand it. And furthermore, you're not getting the tools to deal with it or to understand it. When people hear that I'm a sex educator, they're just like, oh, you're talking about sex all day, which I do. But I also talk to fifth graders about puberty and about how their brains are going to change and
Right.
how, like, it's okay to want to feel these things, right? It's okay that you might like boys, girls, both, or who, they, thems. I don't care. You are going to start to like other people eventually, and that's okay. You're supposed to. Can't procreate without a mate, right? But we're lacking the tools to help them navigate all of that at an earlier age, and pleasure should be part of that conversation. um I grew up, even as a Planned Parenthood educator, like, ooh, the first time I have sex, it's gonna hurt. It's supposed to, right?
Mm.
As an adult, I've had conversations with a lot of people that were like, yo, my first time did not hurt at all. My partner, we were very communicative, and we talked
Right.
about activity, right? um
It depends on what, like, listen, from my perspective, and I grew up in the hood, and I've spoken to a lot of hood people. I don't even know how to say that the right way. It's just it's a certain type of person, and you know this. Like not you, Tamika, but people know what I'm talking about. I've not heard any stories of people saying that it was pleasant. Like it hurt and it wasn't what they expected and it was damn near
and
what they wanted to
and
do.
in it, right? But that's usually the perspective of the vagina owning person. Because
I,
we also talk about pleasure in itself is very penis male centered in the United States, at least, in my opinion. Right? You don't ever hear women talking about some, did you come? No, right? Like, because typically sex will end with
I'm not
ejaculation.
normal. I'm not
It,
normal at
it's
all.
I'm talking in like hetero cis normative couplings or bondings or whatever, which when we talk about sex in America, that is typically the focus, right? Like, it is from a cisgendered heteronormative lens,
Right.
right? Usually sex ends when ejaculation happens. No,
It's a shame. I mean, that's not my experience. That's why I'm like, I
that's
don't I don't
experience
talk to dudes. Like I don't be
from
talking to dudes about
a
this.
societal lens. That is the focus, right? Like, I'm not speaking from my own personal experience. I'm talking from like a greater societal lens through education and research, that this is, and it's not the only view. Let me also say that it's not the only view. I'm just saying that this is the greater perspective of the lens that people are looking through. I mean, that being said, when I do education, I've had kids be like, well, miss, I only sleep with girls, so does that mean I'll be a virgin for forever? Because, right, they're not getting penetrated
Right.
with penis.
Well,
So, right, like that's right. So you also have to understand there's language that kind of needs to be either broken down or just abolished, in my opinion. Like, the whole concept of virginity, in my opinion, should just be completely taken away. But I think, pleasure is left out of mainstream sex in general because of the fear behind it. If we tell kids that sex feels good, they're going to go do it. And like I said earlier, I understand that logic, right? Because as an adult, if somebody was, if even as an adult, if I was like, ooh, try this, this tastes really good, more often than not, someone will go, okay, and I'm just gonna eat it, right? What is it, right? Like,
right.
that's a fair logic to think.
Right.
I can say from my educator standpoint, while I do talk about how pleasure should feel good and the communication that goes behind that, I also talk about the unintended consequences of sex, and not just STIs and unintended pregnancy, but like the emotional aspects behind it, the feelings that come into bonding sexually with somebody. And usually they're like,
Right.
this kind of scary,
Right.
right?
This is the part that hits the youth after the fact, and then they're scrambling to deal with that while their adults are trying to catch up with the fact that they're even in that situation. You know
Yep.
what I mean? So no one's helping them with what you're talking about right now,
I don't want to
except
think
for you, obviously.
having sex. Like
I'm sorry. Say that one more time.
adult parents, guardians don't want to think about their young person having sex, right? Like never, right? I'm almost 40. The conversation I had with my mom, and she's like, no, you're my little girl. I don't want to think about doing that. I'm just like, mom, you know what I do for a living. Let's be
Like,
serious. Like,
right. Like as a 40-year-old woman, if I was to be partnered with someone who's 40 and was able to have access to their mother, I would want them to be able to speak to their mom even about me because I
yeah.
want them to get better.
And we
So I'm
have
like,
those
mom,
boundaries
help.
with my mom, right? And like we didn't have those conversations when I was younger. And not because my mom was like nervous to have them or scared, but it was because I was a peer educator. And so I was coming home being like, guess what I learned at work today? So like Planned Parenthood just kind of beat her to the punch. But that with that being said, I always felt comfortable to like talk to my mom. And that also is where conversations about sex and pleasure, because you can't talk about sex without talking about pleasure, really need to start. Kids do want to hear about things from their parents. At the same time, it's awkward for both parties, right? Like, nobody wants to hear about their parents having sex, but like, if we got questions, that is the first resource that you should be able to go to comfortably. Right? And again, this is all in theory and in a perfect world. And I know that this is not the case for a lot of people, right? But
No, this is right. There's so many different variables to these things.
even when I talk to adults, I'm like, they are just as uncomfortable as y'all. It is uncomfortable for everybody involved. But as the adults, we would like to think that you are more prepared to lean into that awkwardness and, push your way through it for you and for your young people.
I think that's a great point to make that a lot of times our youth, even adult grown people who are adults, they're looking for their parents to have met this challenge, conquered this, dealt with emotion. We are, as a child, I'm like, yo, I'm really looking to my parent to be like, okay, I've lived ahead of you. I have some information for you. And a lot of times, not my dad necessarily, but a lot of times when I'm speaking with parents, like you said, they're talking to you. They're like, "Hey, how do I deal with this?" And it's like, whoa, if the child has now grown up and became a parent and has children and can't get any information from their parent, you got three generations of people that are like,
I
"Well,
don't know what you're doing.
right."
And furthermore, in my experience, it's, oh, well, I already had the talk with them, right? We already talked about it. I told them, don't get nobody pregnant. Keep your legs closed, right? It's always something real simple and succinct with a nice little bow on it. And then it gets tucked away to never be spoken about again.
And it's
With
something that they don't follow.
exactly. But also this isn't a one-off conversation,
Right.
right? This is a again, there are layers to this conversation. There are levels to this conversation. It might be like, look, I know it's going to be awkward to talk about. We're going to talk about it for a little bit right now, but we're going to circle back to this on Wednesday, right? Like,
Right. Now I think that's a part of like helping parents and young people learn how to be parents and children. You know what I mean? Like we need to have some conversation about how people can do those things because, growing up in a certain environment and then transitioning to other environments will, start to
yeah,
expose certain things that you never even thought was a problem. So I've heard a lot of women who came from a certain neighborhood would go to college and then learn from a person like yourself, and then they'll say things like, "Oh my goodness, I never realized I was in a bad situation, that I didn't, that I didn't really want to be in that therefore that was wrong."
Yeah.
They've been taught that this person wants you, so just go along with it. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So how do you think that this affects the conversations around pleasure when a person, whether it be the male person or the female or what have you, like how do you think that affects the youth when they're having the conversation with you, but also having to deal with their cultural norms, even for people that aren't quote unquote from the hood, like people that
Yeah.
are like, they live very far away from others, so they only see certain people every now and then. So when you have a certain, like a cousin, and it's like people are like, I've heard stories where people said they practiced kissing with their cousins to learn
Oh,
how to do it. You know what
I
I'm
mean,
saying? And I'm
right.
like, man,
What age were you doing that? Were you 8 or were you 25? Right? Like,
I've heard both stories, and the 8-year old situation made more sense to me.
right? I'm pretty sure I kissed a cousin when I was younger too. I wouldn't surprise me. I mean, I bathed with my cousins, and me and my cousin Ebony were raised together. You know what I'm saying? So like, there is a healthy sense of curiosity, and I do understand that you you are flirting with like some incestual type of things with that when you're 25 and you're kissing you're 25. But I feel like when you're both children,
Right,
I kissed my cousin once, like that, it is what it is, right?
that was the
It's
situation
like
I
it's
heard, and that's
a
what I
little
referenced.
pillow because it felt good and stuff, you know. Like I'm not gonna extrapolate that to being like, oh god, there's something going on, we got to watch this kid till he's an adult. Because I think that is part of a natural, healthy exploration. And in families, more often than not, cousins be raised close, right? Like, or like you got your mama's best friend, that's my cousin too. So like my mama's best friend's kids, that's my cousins, you know, like
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Some of those ain't your cousins,
some
and
of those ain't your cousins,
no,
but you
no. Yeah. But I mean, I remember being a kid and running around and playing in the neighborhood and the games we used to play. And some of those games we were like, hey, how do I figure out what a butt feels like? And
this
I
is
want to see something, you know what I mean?
my shit if the young people in my life I found them playing them today. But right, and this comes with being the adult that now that we know better, hopefully we do better and we are teaching our young people better, because all of
I
those,
didn't name it. That's why I didn't name any of those games, because if they go find them, it's gonna be my fault.
right? But let's talk about those games and the things that they let us explore. We really should have been exploring a conversation about consent and boundaries, because that's all it is. It's a game to figure out consent and boundaries in the most unhealthy way possible. And
Well,
I
once again,
as a
see,
proud participant in my 90s childhood.
this is the thing. Now, I was a quote unquote good boy, so I did play the games, but I played them fair. And I noticed there were other young men and ladies who didn't play that game fair. So,
I played by my rules. Oh, you caught me, too bad. Get away from me, right? Like,
and that's why people didn't play fair, because it was people not playing fair. If you
yeah,
said I'm playing, and you it or whatever, you're supposed to participate.
mm-mm.
When I
I
found out that
I
when
didn't play fair. I hardly acknowledge that.
I found out some rules about those games where it was like, well, if you want to play these games, if a boy catch you, you have to let the boy. And I was like, whoa, I'm playing video games. I want to play with Ninja Turtles. Like,
Right?
that's not what I want to do. You know what I'm saying? I ain't know. I thought
The
thought it was girls versus boys.
night, like this is crazy. Like,
I
right?
ain't know.
And really, those games should have been used as opportunity. Like if I had seen my young people playing that today, again, I understand it, right? Y'all want to go find a little place and to kiss and make out and do this, that, and the third. But like, is consent being respected? Are boundaries being respected? Because again, just because you found me, I am not obligated to do anything. But if I like you and you find me, right? Like
I'm
that's
so sorry. This is the worst question. I'm so sorry. what
Yeah.
do we do? I want to get into the deeper point. Well, what do we do about the person who wants to play the game, gets found, and doesn't want to continue playing the game?
The game shouldn't be being played anymore, anyways.
But that's almost a representation of the actual game. People be like, if if I do these things, then you should know that I'm trying to get these things to come back my way.
Okay, are we talking about the actual game or are we talking like courtship and dating and expectations now?
I'm talking about the expectation of that part of the game where if I find you, we're if I find you, then this is what we're doing.
Those type of games outside of courtship and dating shouldn't be played, right? Like a lot of things get lost in the sauce of miscommunication. And again, this all comes back to having consent and boundaries and holding them. And the only way you can explore those type of things is with communication. And in boundaries with person A might be different from person B. And I don't even mean this in a sexual way, but like,
No, I'm trying not to make it. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
like because when we do talk again in my field, when I talk about consent and boundaries, it is pretty much in a sexual focus because that is the line of my work. But like consent and boundaries and pleasure affect every facet of our life from you want to go to the store with me? Are you hungry? Right? Like if my partner says, "Are you hungry?" and then he disappears into the kitchen and only comes out with food for himself, I'll be like, "Well, why'd you ask me if I was hungry and then go in the kitchen?" I would assume, right? Now, if he said, "Are you hungry?" I'm gonna go make some eggs, and then I say no, and he only comes out with right. So it's the communication of it all. You have to be clear about it, especially when it comes to playing the game of okay, I found you. What are you going to do? Now, if you have too many rules or you don't want to play the game fairly when everybody else is playing the game fair, then don't play the game. But like I said before, have if I were today notice any of my young people in my life playing that game, first off, I'm shutting that shit down immediately. And secondly, we're gonna have a real conversation about consent and boundaries because in games like that, and I know that this is workplace me coming into it, and it's fine. I will plan Parenthood all over it. I will be that guy. I don't care.
Yo,
But
I
like,
need 15 minutes. Listen, I would need 15 minutes to gather myself because I'm gonna be in a bathroom, dying laughing, calling Hoyt like, bruh,
see,
these
yeah,
kids was
I
wilding.
I would have to tell you and Hoyt about it after the fact, right? Because in games like that, boundaries and consent can be violated, right? And nobody trying to catch a case over a quick little hide and go freak, right? Nobody is trying to do that.
Bro, a whole case nowadays. Not nowadays, but a real issue of expecting someone to do something, not
Just,
knowing that that person was not intending for you to find them.
mm-hmm.
They thought you wasn't even trying to find them. They thought you was trying to find that person, and you
Didn't,
found them, and they like, hey, no, you know what I mean. So I understand a lot more in reference to that question I asked earlier. I appreciate that.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I mean, where's the how can pleasure education be more inclusive, of different sexual orientations or gender identities, ability levels, you know what I'm saying? How can we address these things with our youth without giving them a hall pass to go practice?
Well, it's like I said, when in my experience, when the youth are more informed, they don't want to practice. They genuinely are like, I never really thought about these things. I'm gonna wait.
The information replaces the need to practice
Yeah. Or like,
on a level.
feelings, right? That maybe we can talk about masturbation, right? Like, because again, you want to feel that pleasure, but you don't want to involve somebody else quite yet. And I'm a firm believer. I know not everybody feels this way, but like, if you're not comfortable touching yourself, you really should just be having other people touch you, anyways. But that's my own thing. And I know that not everybody agrees with that or feels that way, and that's fine. But if you want to experience pleasure and not have another person involved, then maybe we should have a conversation about masturbation, which is another taboo subject when it comes to our youth,
Right.
which honestly, I would rather they be masturbating than contributing to these gonorrhea and chlamydia co-infection rates that are going up in Erie County right now.
Listen, I just got to be honest with you. I don't want to take the show way off topic, but in my circle, I need the youth to stop dating my friends because I need my friends to stop dating our youth. So if they know more information, maybe they can tell cl-
I,
class of
I
2002, hey, bro,
I've been dating
chill.
like a decade, so I can't really comment on that one. But I mean, from what I have heard, the dating pool in the 716 area is just abysmal at best, anyways.
So then,
But I also think that online dating has done it has done a lot of help, but it has also done a lot of harm in managing expectations with dating. Because like you hear about like Tinder, right? And Tinder's just for smashing. It is smash hookup, right? Like nobody goes to Tinder if they're looking for a real date.
no,
And
I
that's
know people who
really
go on Tinder looking for a real date. I'm confused every time.
exactly. And right, so this is the thing about expectations. You're going looking for something in one place where it's probably not really being delivered. Now, I'm not saying online options aren't an option because I know plenty of people that have been in very successful relationships from meeting their person online. I mean, I would like a 6 year relationship from meeting a person online. So like they are successful, they are helpful, but like it definitely wasn't Tinder because I know Tinder to be the smash and dash website, like that's all it is,
No,
right?
somebody tried to wife or husband me off Tinder, and I was like, "What?" Like that's how I even understood people use Tinder for other things besides meeting people who want to hook up.
Mm-hmm. Which I didn't know. I was like, that's the hookup. That's the hookup dating, right? It's straight grinder, right? It's just straight grinder.
I thought so. It's not like
I think there doesn't
Facebook dating hasn't been out as long, but Facebook dating is what people were that I know were treating
make
Tinder
dating
like.
in it. It it just has ebbed and flowed in popularity. That was when I was in college
Yeah.
the first time.
Yeah.
Um, right. But again, those are conversations about expectations. And I do think when it comes to dating and I'm going to specifically say in the United States, we'd also have to take a look at like the Cinderella Prince Charming complex of it all. We'd have to have a conversation about relationship equity, right? Like, yes, everybody wants to be courted. Yeah, that would be nice, but also in this economy, good luck with that. Um,
I think
and
once again that goes into expectations.
that, right? What are the expectations? What are you looking for? What is going to give you pleasure, right? So if you are like, I want to be with somebody that can pay all my bills and blah 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 blah, that's fine. I'm not going to knock your hustle. I'm not going to be surprised when you struggle to find a partner or they
Right.
wild shit from you because you asking for wild shit from them. But like if that's y'all's expectations of each other, then if it works out for both consenting adults, then so be it. But
Listen,
I think people aren't
Sonic and Eggman, them two, they have a relationship. They keep going at it over chaos. And that's what it is. You know what I'm saying?
so yeah, it's a conversation about expectations. Whether it's I'm just trying to hook up, right? Be clear about that from the beginning so that you ain't got this person over here looking for the Prince Charming to their Cinderella and they're really Lady and the Tramp in it over here, like my Disney movie references. So yeah, which again circles back to communication. All of this, in my opinion, education, pleasure, boundaries, consent, expectations, this is all stuff that circles back to communication,
Right.
which is a lifelong skill that continuously needs to be worked on. Like I know I communicate best in professional workspaces and then followed by like with my friends. And then probably I communicate the least healthiest with my partner, which is a problem for me, right? Like, it should be where I communicate the healthiest, but like
On, man.
sometimes I struggle to say things how I want to,
Yeah.
or we're causing unintentional harm, right? Because unintentional harm is still harm. sometimes we just don't fight fair, but like as long as we stay on a path to get better at it and work towards that commitment, like I'm cool with it because not everything is going to be firing on all cylinders all the time, right? So I don't need our communication to be top notch 100% every single day, as long as I know that we're at least working towards the goal of having it be better eventually.
Right. Right.
Because that is communication, that is pleasure, that is boundaries. Things that I was cool with in my 20s, I'm not doing that now anymore. Things I was like, I would never do that, I might give it a try. Who knows, right? Boundaries change, those have to be communicated. I might have let you do that thing that one time, but we ain't never doing that again, right? Like, we tried it, I wasn't a fan, I'm sorry that you were, right? But like, you have to communicate these boundaries, these expectations, and they change throughout relationships, I think. And I think that's something that we as a human, especially our young people, struggle with, because once sex gets involved, expectations change. I don't care who you are. If you have a heartbeat and you are having sex, your expectations with the person that you are having sex with change,
Right.
and to be discussed, because that's where a lot of the miscommunication and the headbutting comes into place.
Right. Right. Well, I really appreciate you for coming here with us. Before we fully wrap up, I just wanted to know if you could help us with any resources that you know of where somebody who wanted to dig deeper into the conversation about pleasure, human pleasure, teaching youth, or anything that's on your desk, if you will. Well, what would you suggest as a resource for people who wanted to go further with this topic?
I mean, I know it sounds cheesy, but at Planned Parenthood, we actually do have an Askable Adult program.
Hmm.
We also have a program called Families Talking Together. Both
Okay.
are aimed. Families Talking Together is a little more aimed at having the conversation before your child or youth is sexually active, and having the conversation about delaying it longer. Um, the youth risk behavior surveys show that youth in Erie County are having some type of sexual activity, not necessarily penetrative sex. So like it could be hand stuff as early
Mm.
as 9.5. So we are targeting 10 to 12-year olds with the Families Talking Together. So if you know anybody or anybody listening, you have youth that age and you like, I want to talk to them, but I don't know how,
And
hit
it's
them.
true. Oh, the people I know, they literally are in that 9.5, 8, 9 area.
We offer it in English and in Spanish. And if you got anybody that speaks another language, just we ask you give us time to hit up the International Institute to find an interpreter, because we are trying to deliver this to as many people in Buffalo as possible. And we acknowledge that we have a large refugee population here as well. So, and that also does tap into some cultural norms where, like, I've encountered some parents that are like, my kid would never. And I'm like, you don't know, because your kid is being exposed to things that they didn't experience or wouldn't have been exposed to where you relocated from or where you immigrated from, right? Like these first generation kids hit different.
Man, America hit
Oh,
different. The water
and,
different, the
and
air different. That
but like
chicken got something in it.
different. And like they either gonna be world saving or right, like it's anywhere on the spectrum, but like we want to still make sure that we're having those conversations. And I know that it bridging cultural gaps is a little more difficult than bridging generation gaps. Um, but at the end of the day, again, we're all human animals that are pleasure driven and born to procreate, whether we want to or not. Like I do not want to have biological children of my own, but like there was a whole 5 years where my ovaries was like babies, right? Like when we having them, right? You know that meme with the dude behind the tree? Like that was my ovaries, like girl, having that baby, right? Even though my brain, like,
With my frog. I thought you was gonna play with my frog.
right? Mm-mm.
Um,
No, let them
but
collect dust back there.
no,
Um,
ma'am, no, ma'am. You are a wonderful woman who helps the community in a variety of ways. You help our children, and you've been working with our youth for so long. I don't have any issues about your womanhood. So I want to say I appreciate you and thank you so much for being here today. Um, Tamika Neal, she is the manager of outreach and education over at Planned Parenthood of Central and Western New York. Shout out to everybody over there. And also, Tamika is an awesome poet. That's all I'll say. You wrote one poem back in the day that became a whole song. So
High school after I went to a poetry slam. Um, I do want to plug though. We just got a menstrual pantry up and running in our at the Connection in Niagara Falls and at our Bayville location in Buffalo. So if there's anybody that needs pads, tampons, panty liners, and we got like ones with wings and overnight. Hopefully Donald puts my email address in the comment, my work email address, tamika.neal@ppcwny.org. Hit me up and we can link up. I can get you safe sex products. I can get you menstrual products, all the things. We can do one-on-ones with parents that maybe are having trouble talking with your youth. We can facilitate that conversation with you and your youth, right? The three of us can be in the room and we just kind of play mediator a little bit. Sometimes having a third party that's an outside entity can kind of help things run a little smoother. I know Native American Services, Community Services does some askable adult stuff too. And they have a lot of family oriented services as well. And Leaving Our Legacy, which is through BOCES, has a lot of youth focused and branded opportunities. I think they're actually hiring for some peer educators. We are not. We are finally at full capacity.
that's what's up.
4 years. But yeah, so I just wanted to plug those pluggables.
I gotta talk to you after this. Thank you. All right, y'all. We're gonna be out. Boom boom clap. We out.
Bye. The millennial urge to throw up peace signs.